I want you to tell me your perspective on two family trip car disaster stories that I have very little or no memory of.
Okay.
One is the Blue Chevelle's engine.
I'll tell you that one.
And then the other one is the truck and the camper with the jack in Idaho.
Oh, yeah. I know both those.
So tell me the first one. Where were we?
We got to tell you how you got into that position first. We were driving up to Idaho one time, and everybody was sleeping. I don't know if you know where Kamen is, but it's up on the hill on the way down to Pocatello. If you're going up to Pocatello from Idaho, it's the first town in Idaho. And so I was driving, and Mom went to sleep, and the rest of the kids were kind of nodding off and stuff. And so I said, I wonder how fast this will go, because this is a freeway that just goes straight until you get to the turn off to go to...
I've driven one of your cars at 100 miles an hour in that stretch in the middle of the night as well.
Well, I decided I wanted to see how fast I could go and how long I could do it. This was in the middle of the night, the middle of the day. And I averaged 105 miles an hour from McCammon to Pocatello. Average, that means I had to get up above 105. But actually, basically, I got over 100 and just kept it down. And after that, the car ran fine, but had a little click in the engine. Click, click, click. Which I found out later when we was the cracked piston. But I never drove it in hot weather after that or fast. So now we're going to go to the family reunion, and we're going to stop at Grandma and Grandpa's place to stay overnight first so that we can not have to drive that all the way. And we're outside the town of Parker, or one of those towns anyway. We're between Parker, Arizona, the river, and Grandma's place in Yucca Valley. It means you go through Yucca Valley through 29 Palms, and then you just keep going instead of, it goes different ways.
So you're on the way from Yucca Valley to Parker.
To Parker or past Parker. We probably stop and get something to eat there and then keep going, you know.
Oh, so you're after Parker going east toward...
No, we were between Parker and I'm probably driving about 80 miles an hour.
Okay, so you're on a...
Single lane highway.
Between Yucca Valley and Parker, going east.
Yeah. And I didn't see many cars very often, and so I'm driving through there, and all of a sudden the car just went poof.
Did it get louder right before that or anything?
Just heard a noise go poof. When they opened it up, they found pieces of that piston everywhere along in that one cylinder. So I just drove it too hot. Out in the desert's already hot, and I'm driving 80 miles an hour, and too far. I probably could have driven it 20 miles at that and not hurt it. I assume the metal expanded and made the crack bigger, you know, because it expanded away from itself, not just to itself, but, you know, away. It made the crack bigger, and then gasoline got between it and exploded, as it's supposed to, and sent it everywhere.
You didn't have the strength to hold the explosion anymore.
It just went poof. No big noise or anything. I just poof, and just went. And boy,
posted to a stop.
Out in the middle of the desert, and when it's hot, it's a long sounding, long ways to go. I hope I could keep coasting until I found someplace, you know. And I just pulled over and got out of the way while we still could, you know. All the engine had some kind of movement. The car had movement, so I could get it off the road.
So you noticed right away, the engine was gone, you push on the gas pedal, nothing happens. You stop, you probably crank it a bit, nothing happens.
I didn't know what happened for sure, you know, but I knew it wasn't going to run. I did enough to know that. And I'm not greatly knowledgeable about cars, but I knew enough to know that that wasn't going anyplace without being towed in someplace. And so we sat out there probably a half hour. And along came, and we prayed, as we often did, you know. And I didn't have a real deep commitment to the gospel until I was, what was I, 65 years old. Now, I was maybe 6 years, but I was about 64 before I had my conversion story. And we all have our conversion stories. We have our baptism dates. We all have our conversion story where we get commitment to the gospel. And I didn't have that deep commitment to the gospel until I was sick in the hospital in 2002. So I'm praying with the family, but I believed in prayer. I always have believed in prayer and deep in prayer. And along comes a guy who was a highwayman, who works for the highway company, and he checks all this stuff for things, you know, and he just drives back and forth and stuff. So he came and he said, "What, you got problems?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's not uncommon here." He said, "Jump in the truck here." We all got into the truck somehow or another, you know, and
you had 3 kids then.
Yeah, 3 kids, and we. This was in 1972. This happened. So you would have been around, but not remembering much of it. He took us to his home.
Okay.
And his wife was there, and she made lunch for us, and put on the. And she put on the television with the cartoons. And you guys are fine, and he told me where to call to get a tow truck to tow it. He wasn't a rescue guy. He was the highway inspection person for that section. I'm going to enjoy going over to your house in the Millennium and seeing your newest review.
Yeah, well,
I could probably catch him with it on.
it's pretty common. Okay, so let's go back to
Car.
he picked you up.
Picked us up, took her to his house. His wife fed us lunch and turned on the cartoons. And I called the tow people, and I was going to have him tow it to his house right then, you know, and decide what to do with it. Meantime, I used their phone to call my dad, and I said, "Dad, I have 1972. It has had 105,000 miles on it. What do you think I ought to do?"
What year was the car?
72.
It was brand new.
Yeah, it was fairly. Well, it was not brand new. It was about. It had 105,000 miles on it.
How'd you get 105,000 miles on a car in a year?
No, it wasn't a year. It was. We had that car from about 1968 to 72. We kept that car, you know, further along.
It wasn't a 72.
Huh?
It wasn't a 72 car. It was a
68 car, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a Chevelle wagon.
You lived in Camarillo when you bought it?
Yeah, bought it Curtis Chevrolet in Thousand Oaks.
Okay.
Our days of buying new cars every 3 or 4 years.
Back to the desert.
And I talked to my dad about it, and he said, "Well," he said, "if you can get good mileage on it, and it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to do the engine, I'd do it." But he said, "You're out in the desert, and things cost a lot more often in these little desert towns. The prices are higher because they can't get the stuff there, that stuff."
And they can charge you whatever they want.
Yeah. So I said, "Well, I'll have it towed to Parker. I can either junk it in Parker, or I can, you know, whatever." So I took it to the Chevrolet dealer in Parker. And
You had to get to that reunion
yeah,
somehow.
yeah. And so,
Cars weren't very prevalent, were they?
huh?
Rental cars weren't very prevalent, were they?
What cars?
Rental cars?
No, and we never had rented a car then.
So you told us to Parker, if you didn't have this car with you, you had to come up with something.
Yeah, and we figured that out. But anyway, the story was, had it towed it into Parker. I called the guy after he looked at the engine. He told me what was wrong with it, and I said, well, it doesn't surprise me. And so I said, well, give me a price at putting a new engine in it. He said, you want a new one? I said, yeah, I probably do. Give me a price for the new one and the used one. You know, one from their junkyard area there. And it was $700 brand new. And it was like $621 used. And I called my dad and he said, $700 a brand new engine? Are you kidding me? He said, that's $500, $600 to $1,000 less than most places would cost you. I assume it was because the labor was really cheap. And they just ordered it directly from the Chevrolet plant, you know, the nearest place where they had full engines. It wasn't, they didn't have any place around you could go get a Chevy engine, you know. There was used. But I told my dad about that. He said, buy the new. You're gonna get guaranteed, and a new engine you don't beat up, you're gonna get 50, 60,000 miles on it. And we actually got a lot more than that, but I gave that car up when it was rusting, and it had about 185,000 miles on it when I turned that in to the junkyard. I actually traded it in. But so we got into Parker and signed the papers to get it started. He told me approximately when it run. He said, I'll call you. You know, I gave him the place where the reunion would be, because Jim had a phone, and in his cabin there. So we got on the bus, rode the bus into Mesa, went up to reunion with other people. They're all going up anyway. You guys rode with your cousins, so it was fun. And we had a great reunion, and that's when we learned to sing a song in front of everybody. I don't know if you remember that. We had a talent, and we had to sing a song. You probably don't remember that. Mom and I...
I remember that later. I certainly don't remember the 70s.
Mom and I learned to sing a song called I'm on the top of the world looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find. We sang a duet of that, and it was really beautifully done, but Mom never liked to sing with me. So that was the last we'd do that. But then reunion was over, went back down into Mesa, got on the same bus, and went up to Parker and picked up a brand new car, a brand new engine, and we only had one problem. They had break-in periods with those engines compared to what they do now, you know. And Japanese never did, because they were much more tolerant, less tolerance involved, you know. But you had to get there was more distance between the pistons and everything, so you had to get it set in. You couldn't drive it over 50 miles an hour. So we drove home at 50 miles an hour, and then we would get some overheating while you were even doing that, which is metal on metal inside the engine, you know, getting seated. And so we just slowed down more, so it wouldn't rub so fast, and less friction. And we said it took us probably 4 or 5 hours longer than it would be to come home normally. We actually didn't go back through that way. I remember we went down the river and got down on the main highway and went down through Blythe and Indio, that whole area, Capizon. We drove slower, got on the freeway, and driving 50 miles an hour. You still see people drive like that occasionally, but we drove it home and drove it until I turned it in. The engine was all fine when we turned it in. I would think that somebody would have got a bargain if they wanted that car, but a brand new engine. It was a 68 Chevelle engine, but it was brand new in 72, and it had 105,000. It's only had about 60,000 miles on it when I gave it in, or 70, something like that. Those are beautiful engines, beautiful cars. Not as far as for American cars, those like Chevelles and that engine. It was one of those cars that they built right, and those engines just kept going on and on until the Japanese took them over. But that was that story.
Okay. Now we're one big trip, family vacation.
The camper.
In the camper, baby blue Ford pickup truck.
3/4 ton pickup truck. Heavy thing. Got 9 miles a gallon.
We're out in the middle of northern Idaho somewhere.
Well, we always trying to plan a trip. I was working on my doctorate degree. So we always trying to plan a trip after my doctorate degree, summers, someplace.
I thought this was 76.
Well, just wait. Someplace. And then after that was Idaho Falls. I had to go see Grandma, you know. We'd always go to Idaho Falls after those trips to see Grandma, and after we'd be in, so it was always up that way. And one summer we went to, after I finished all my work and I had to take my qualifying exams, we went to Oregon, Washington. Another, you know, we just, those kind of trips. So this is one of those things where we're up to see Grandma, and we were going to go up there anyway. So I said, well, we do this every summer. We go see the same trip all the time, Grandma's, you know. But that's what you do when your folks' relatives, you know, your wife's relatives. And so we decided to take this camper and go to Canada on this trip. We went up to Banff and Lake Louise and Cardston, Calgary, down to a beautiful swimming pool, park and stuff there on the way down into British Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful areas. Down through Bonner's Ferry into Idaho, Pend Oreille, and Lake Coeur d'Alene. And so then we decided to go and see Washington State University. I always like to go to university campuses or community college campuses, just comparisons and learn. So we went over to Spokane and went down to Washington State University. And right from Washington State University, 7 miles across the border is University of Idaho. They're 7 miles from each other, 2 different states. And their social relationship is dating back and forth all the time. So that was a fun thing to see.
Wait, so Washington State University is like in Spokane?
Washington State is not in Spokane. It's in Puyallup or something like that. I forget the name of it. Anyway, some little town. I just knocked this over.
Okay, keep going.
Is in some little town, which is a college town. And it's about all there is there is a college town. And for some reason, the lovely people of Idaho put their University of Idaho across the border 7 miles from there. And so you have all kinds of activities going between the two of them, you know. And neither town was big enough to support much of anything but a university. And then we go down to, from there, down a really big steep hill down into Lewiston. Now we're in Lewiston, and we decided to go back to Idaho Falls before we went home. So to get there, you take this the Lewis-and-Clark Trail and the Clearwater River, right next to the Clearwater River, on your way up to Yolo, Montana, which then you followed it down into Idaho, into eastern Idaho. So we started up in the evening going. This was a trip that we got stopped by a policeman.
I remember that too.
And he had one of the first radars and filled his whole car inside of it. And he caught us going the opposite direction. And he said, there'll be a fine such and such. And I said, well, good. Well, send it to us. And he said, I signed something, you know. No, you have to go up and pay it now. It was 11 o'clock at night, you know. What do you mean 11? No, you have to go pay it now. So $40. We drove back 7 or 8 miles to this little tiny town. The judge comes out, and his robes probably has pajamas underneath it. Whack, you know, some of those things like you see in some of those old movies, you know. I thought maybe they're going to put us in a boneyard or something, you know.
$40 is easy, no problem.
Well, $40 was a lot of money. And
I know, but still, $40 to get out of there and give
yeah, well, all I wanted was to get out of there. I I heard all the stories about these places, and this is one of those places I read about later in some of the books that were out, on traps and how they supported their whole area. And paid their judge. They didn't have judges, they had a judge. He probably got a bigger cut out of it than he, Okay. Yeah. So now we're going along the Clearwater River, much later than we wanted to be. And we decided to, now this memory, I'm not absolutely sure how this happened, but we pulled over, we were tired, we pulled out next to the river. I know it was dark. We could hear the river right next to us. But we all went to our sleeping positions, which we'd set up in that camper, Mom and Dad slept in the top, and somebody slept here, and I think somebody else slept outside in a tent. At least that's the way it was, and we were in the rest of the trip. We slept that night.
I think I slept on the front seat of the truck.
Yeah.
And the table folded into a bed, and
yeah.
But Dane or Darren slept in that orange tent outside.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Back when we were up in Banff, we stayed in State Park there. Not State, what do they call them? Provincial Park. And Darren had a moose come up to his tent and nudge the tent, see if there's any food or something. He'd come from the trash cans over there across the way. And here Darren looking out and faced up with a moose right here. I wish I had a camera to see that. We were scared. We didn't know what to do about chasing moose, whether they attack you or whatever. But anyway, so when we wake up in the morning, we had I think we had 2 flat tires, remember, right in the back. They were in the back, they weren't in the front on this vehicle. And if my memory right, I tried to jack it up. Couldn't get that done. Jack wasn't strong enough to lift the camper and the truck. And I didn't know that much about truck jacks. I should have used that one time at home, and studied it and learned how to use it. But I don't think it would. I've never used the one on this truck. I don't know how to use it either. But now I just call AAA and they come and get me. So then this is like 6 a.m. in the morning, 5:45, when it was. We always got up and left when the kids got up. We didn't have any. When the first kid gets up, the rest of the kids, it's get some wash and eat. Well, let's get out of here. Let's go do something else. And nothing, I couldn't get that up. And I always, whenever I bought a car, I always bought an X thing to take because I hated those bent things, So I had that, and it stripped the bolts because they just wouldn't come off. They were under too much pressure already. I might have drove them into a lot of pressure with weight on it, driving for years, long ways. But whatever it was, they just stripped. And I'm not going back to that judge's town. I'm going to Yolo if I can get there to get help, And I decided I would hitchhike and go to Yolo. And your mom, who had much closer feelings to the Lord than I did at the time, said, let's pray. So we all got around in a circle on our knees, the days when I could kneel. And I prayed. The man in the house prays, priesthood. And we prayed quite a while. I was listening for help, I wasn't saying the family prayer. I was praying for help, from our family. Do I need to go up there? Shall I walk? Maybe then try to find a ride later on. What should I do? And bring somebody back to help. And I knew it was, by the time we got the prayer going to be done, it's going to be 6 a.m. Well, no cars coming up on this 6 a.m. What am I going to do at Yolo if it's 6:30 a.m.? Nobody there, I'm sure they would have somebody that dealt with these things, because there's people, this is a lonely road. And there's lonely roads going each way the other way. And finally, So we prayed, and we prayed a long time. And some couple cars came by. And went, hey, yay! You know, yeah! And then white, looked like an El Camino. You remember the old El Caminos?
I have a vague memory of this car.
Yeah, a white car that kind of looked like a truck and a car combined. And he drove past us, one of those, goodbye. And further down, he stopped, hit the brakes. He turned around and came back, why? And I thought, well, I'll get it right into yellow now, you know. But he's coming from yellow, at least from that direction. So maybe I can get a ride. Maybe I have to go to the other place. They don't recognize me. Hit me from where fines or something. And I told him that we were praying for help, that we needed help. And he said, well, what kind of help you need? He says, I know you got, are your tires bad? And I said, I don't think the tires are bad. But I've got, I only had one tire bad. Yeah, it wasn't two. Because we fixed one and we were able to drive. Otherwise, we'd been dead. Only had one spare. And I said, but I can't get the truck lifted up, and I can't get that thing off there. He said, well, maybe I can help you. So he opens the back of his vehicle and brings out this pneumatic type jack. You know, it wasn't like jacks we had seen. You know, it was just. That truck went up, bang, just like that. And we said, what's he doing? Mom was talking about me. Like, what's he doing at 6:30 in the morning, coming here with a jack? You know, where's he coming from? So, but you know, let's get this done. And I said, but then I've stripped my nuts and stuff, and I can't get it off. And he said, oh, just a second. He had a thing that clamped on him, you know, like the locking wrenches, only this was big. It's made for big trucks to handle these things. He locked it on there, and they were off. And we took it off and put the spare on and put it back on. And we talked to him and told him we'd been praying and what kind of help. And he said, well, you know, I was laying in bed this morning in the motel there. I was coming from Wisconsin or someplace in his business, and he handles trucks and stuff like that, you know. And he had to go back and get another truck to take where he's going, back the other way. And he said, I was laying in bed there, and he said, I said, I usually get up at 7 or 8, 9 and go have my breakfast and you know, just move along. I have to do this all the time. It's just my normal pattern. He said, but I have this really feeling that I really need to get home faster and get leaving early, like there was something wrong at home, you know. And he said, so I got up and I left at 6 a.m. and I haven't done that in a long, long time. But he said, I had a real inspiration that I had to be there. And he said, when I drove past you guys, I knew I had to be home. But then I had this inspiration that I needed to stop, see what's going on with you guys. And so all of a sudden, he leaves early, which we'd have been there 3 or 4 more hours later, and I don't know what have happened in that kind of situation. Who knows? I might have been down someplace else, you know. And he had the very jack we needed, and he had the very nut puller offer, you know, whatever they call them, wrench we needed. And I have never seen anybody with anything at the back of his car my whole life before or after. Here's this guy, comes from Yellow, Montana, and we prayed, and everybody knew we prayed. Even the kids knew we prayed, you know. We weren't kneeling and saying, oh, this is nice, and this has been fun.
Well, no, Darren and Dave probably remember this better, but, you know, this was not lost on me.
This was a real problem for our lives, our whole family, you know. We didn't have much food left, and we didn't know whether there's cars coming by, and if they did, they're going to have anything to help us. And the best I was hoping for is I could get a ride to someplace to find somebody I could tell them what I had, the problem, and they might find somebody who had a jack like that. It was open whenever I got there, and that I could get back, and I could do it, and then get a ride back again. You know, this was going to take all day if we got it done. And I thought, well, we may have to sleep here another night, or I may have to go in there and stay because I can't get a ride back because it got dark. And then they'd have to stay, and then I'd come back the next morning, and all this with these little kids. And it was a heart-shaking thing, but it worked. You knelt in prayer and asked for help from the Lord, and there it was. And I've had many experiences of that, even before I got close to the Lord, where I needed help, and I prayed. And right there, you know.
No, in my mind, that's you know, a singular family shared faith building experience. And like I said, Darren and Dane probably remember that a little differently. Dallin doesn't remember it all. He was 2. So, as I recall, this was in '76.
Yeah, I was approximately then.
And so I would have been 7.
And you remember much of it?
I remember the white car.
Do you remember the predicament we were in? Thinking it was...
I remember that I didn't until recently remember... I knew there was some problem that we needed help with. I don't remember actually I never remember that the jack didn't work. I remember we couldn't get the bolts off. Because I have this memory of going to Sears in Idaho Falls with you after that to get a new X-jack, X-wrench.
Yeah.
And
I stripped both. I stripped the bolts. I stripped that, so when he had a wrench that grabbed those bolts and snapped them in. And then I had to get new ones later on, because if I got...
Yeah, so you made it back to Idaho Falls and got the problem fixed in Idaho Falls.
Yeah, I had to get new bolts after that.
Did you jack in Idaho Falls too?
I think what I did is I went to the station. They taught me how to use this one in the correct way so that it would work on the camper if I didn't have... If this thing, you know, if I didn't have this problem or that problem, because you had a compression of the soil there that was... It would compress and go down in. So as you start to get heavy weight on it, it's that jack kept going down into the ground. Yeah.
Okay.
But this guy had a jack that, my memory was it was a pneumatic jack that was pillow-based. It went under the truck and just lifted the whole back end up. And he ran it off his engine. And he used this in his work all the time. And I said, I remember asking him, how often do you come to? He said, well, my work will bring me through this area about once every 6 months. And because I go into different other places. He was transporting big trucks back and forth between whatever, you know, I don't know what for. So he had to have this if he had problems with them, you know. And he would have he had a setup where he could carry his vehicle behind the trucks. And this was an El Camino type car. El Caminos were Fords, Chevrolets that
I remember.
That had a pickup truck in the back.
It was a car that had an open bed, more or less.
That's right.
It was more of a car than a truck, but
yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean that's I don't know, maybe it didn't strike my older brothers like it, you know, but I definitely remember that was a time when, you know, we were in need, we called upon the Lord, and the cavalry came. We're like, oh, well, hey, there's something to this.
And we didn't have, the Lord didn't come with general help. He came with very specific help for our very specific need at the time we needed it. It wasn't like he showed up at 7 o'clock that night, and then it would have been hard for us to do it. And he could have had another jack like mine that would have gone down in just like mine did. Maybe the two of them I could have done something, but he had a pillow type thing that, and I'd never seen him before. It slid underneath the back of the truck and just pumped it, and he pumped it off of his engine, and it just went like that.
You know, once in my life have I had the opportunity to stop. I was alone and help somebody. I was actually coming home from BYU once, And as I recall, I was like halfway between Cedar City and St. George. And I saw, with enough time for you to do something about it, I saw a family on the side of the road. Felt like I should stop. I saw a mom. It was like a older station wagon, and the mom and some kids were out, and the back end was open. Stuff was starting to be unpacked, and so I just felt like and so I don't always feel like I should pull over. Sometimes you wonder and you keep moving. But I stopped,